Imagine you're sitting in a crowded emergency room.
911, what's your emergency?
You've been waiting for hours with chest pain, but you keep seeing others go ahead of you. Turns out, an algorithm is deciding who gets seen first. And that algorithm is prioritizing patients with the highest historical healthcare needs based on their past healthcare costs. Sounds objective? Sure. Fair and good for patients? I don't think so. Because here's the twist. Cost isn't the same as need. And if that algorithm story sounds familiar, it's because it really happened. In 2019, researchers uncovered a widely deployed algorithm in the US healthcare system that was systematically underestimating the needs of patients from historically underserved communities. Why? Because those communities, on average, had lower past healthcare costs. Not because they were healthier. Over 200 million people were impacted. Once the bias was identified, adjustments were made to the algorithm to focus on clinical data rather than cost proxies. And that led to a strong improvement. Care for underserved groups increased from 17% to 47%. And that leads us to what we're talking about today: responsible process intelligence. Because when AI makes decisions that affect people's lives, how do we make sure it makes the right decisions? Welcome to Trust the Process, the podcast that demystifies the world of process mining and process intelligence. I'm your host, Angela, from the Celonis Academic Alliance, and in today's episode, we're diving into one of the most important and yet overlooked questions in tech. What does it mean to build responsible process intelligence? And how do we make sure PI isn't just efficient, but also fair, transparent, and trustworthy? Our guides today are two experts who live and breathe this. Will van der Aalst is credited with founding the field of process mining, and of course, he also investigated the ethics behind responsible process intelligence. And Vanessa Candela is the Chief Legal Officer and Ethical AI Leader at Celonis. So let's start with the basics. To kick things off, let's define what we actually mean by responsible process intelligence. Responsible PI is part of the larger research field of responsible AI. It's not just about compliance. It's about building trust into the systems we use to optimize decisions. From how a hospital discharges patients to how a supply chain prioritizes shipments. Let's hear from Vanessa and Will.
Responsible process intelligence means doing this in a way that aligns with ethical principles, sustainability goals of companies, and really fairness in decision-making and operations. Some key components to that, like ethical AI and analytics, right? Ensuring that AI-driven decisions and processes are unbiased, fair, and explainable. Transparency and accountability, providing clear explanations for how decisions are made by intelligent systems. Human-centric design, which by that I mean, there has to be a human in the loop.
If you would like to define responsible process intelligence, you can say that it is the usage of event data and process mining and AI techniques to improve processes. But now the important part comes in such a way that it is not harmful for people. So this considers things like, for example, not violating somebody's privacy. That's very easy to imagine. But of course, these process techniques, they also influence people. So you also need to think about things like transparency, fairness, and whether the results are accurate at all.
So let's take that to the emergency room. Hospitals are using PI to analyze delays and optimize how patients move through the system. Sounds great, right? But what if the system learns that patients under 40 tend to recover faster and cost less to treat, and then start prioritizing them? If we're not careful, the AI starts making decisions that look efficient, but leave older patients waiting longer, even when their conditions are worse. And that's what Vanessa means by human-centric. The goal isn't just to optimize care. It's to make sure every patient gets the care they need, when they need it. Now that we know what responsible PI is, the next question is, Why does it matter so much? Why can't we just assume our algorithms are neutral if the data is solid? Well, as Vanessa explains, even good data can lead to bad outcomes if we lose trust in the process.
We want to optimize workflows in hospitals to ensure that there's efficiency in that process. But we have to do that while we ensure patient data privacy and ethical treatment. So if you have process intelligence, the people that are leveraging the outcomes from that need to be able to trust that process. And so if you don't show that you are being responsible in how you're leveraging that process intelligence or how you're designing the PI tools, then you won't gain the trust of the users and the stakeholders, and it makes it very difficult to be successful.
And in our emergency room, that trust is everything. If the tool tells a nurse to discharge an older patient early but doesn't explain why, it breaks trust. And if clinicians don't trust the system, they won't use it. Or worse, they'll follow it blindly. Either way, we lose the value process intelligence is meant to create. Responsible PI is about building systems that people understand, trust, and can challenge when needed. To help us build trust into our systems, there's a simple but powerful guide, the FACT framework. It stands for fairness, accuracy, confidentiality, and transparency. With a little help from our guests, we'll apply that to our hospital.
Ethical AI and analytics, right? Ensuring that AI-driven decisions and processes are unbiased, fair, and explainable, avoiding harm by monitoring for potential unintended consequences.
Let's say your model prioritizes patients who typically have shorter stays, but those patients are overwhelmingly younger. Even if unintentionally, the system is now disadvantaging older adults. Fairness means identifying and correcting those hidden biases. Next up in the FACT framework is accuracy. And when it comes to PI, accuracy isn't just about getting the numbers right. It's about understanding what those numbers actually mean. Let's start with how Will van der Aalst frames that problem.
And very important, people that get to see process intelligence results, we also need to make sure that they really interpret it correctly, because diagnostics can be very misleading if people do not understand exactly what they mean.
Let's say your ER dashboard shows patient wait times are dropping. Great news. But if you look closer, you realize it's because the system is flagging lower risk patients to be treated sooner, while higher risk ones are still waiting longer. And that's what happens when we optimize the wrong thing, like speed without context. And that brings us to Simpson's paradox, a classic trap when analyzing aggregated data.
The Simpson's paradox is the phenomenon that you may look at different groups, for example, different groups of patients, different group of students, and you may find a certain pattern, and then you look at the whole, then you find exactly the reverse. And this is best explained using some examples. So you can, for example, look at the university and you can compare the different study programs and how, for example, male students are, let's say, doing in comparison to female students. And then you may find that in every individual study program, females are doing better than males. And then you combine all your data and you look at the overall picture, and then you find that actually males are doing better than females. This sounds as if it is not possible, but it is possible. And that's why it's called Simpson's paradox.
So how does that play out in the ER? Your process intelligence system might show that early discharge leads to fewer readmissions overall. But when you break it down by age group, you realize the system's logic only holds for younger patients. Older ones are being sent home too early and are coming back sicker. The danger is that the aggregated data hides nuance.
It is very dangerous and often incorrect to just look at aggregate statistics. And so what is the order lead time? You really need to look at things in much more detail in order to be able to compare different processes and to learn how you can really improve. It's the same as if you would look at the hospital. So some hospitals are treating patients with very complicated diseases. Another hospital is just, treating patients that have simple diseases. If you start comparing both without looking at that, you may come to the conclusion that the hospital that is just handling the easy cases is doing much better, which is of course not the case.
And that's why accuracy in process intelligence means more than just crunching numbers. It means asking, what's behind this pattern? Who does it apply to? And where might it lead us in the wrong direction? Process intelligence is powerful because it doesn't just show you what's happening, it helps us understand why. We still need to talk about the C in the FACT criteria: confidentiality. Now imagine this. You're in the ER again, and the hospital is using process intelligence to optimize patient flow. They'll predict who'll need care first and how urgently. The system seems smart and efficient, but then you start wondering. How does it know all this? It's pulling from your visit history, your insurance records, possibly even your socioeconomic status, maybe also your neighborhood or even your ethnicity. And you didn't even know. And this is where things get uncomfortable. Because the more helpful process intelligence becomes, the more data it thrives on. And at some point we have to ask, how much data is too much data? And that's what the concept of confidentiality is all about. And it closely relates to data minimalism. And at some point we have to ask, how much data is too much data? And that is what the concept of confidentiality is all about. And it closely relates to data minimalism.
Privacy laws require organizations to collect the smallest amount of data they need for a specific purpose, and that purpose has to be permitted by whoever owns that data, right? But process intelligence drives on large, diverse data sets. So how do you balance the need to collect excessive amounts of data for the process intelligence to thrive versus reducing the amount of data that you're collecting to the bare minimum?
That balance between insight and privacy is where the tension lives. Let's say your hospital wants to optimize ER patient flow. So they start pulling in new data like previous admissions, zip code, maybe even socioeconomic indicators. Is it useful? Absolutely. But is it legal? Well, that depends on the purpose, the consent, and the local privacy laws like GDPR or CCPA.
Privacy laws fundamentally require organizations to collect only the data they need for a specific purpose as permitted by a data subject. So when you're talking about personal data and laws like GDPR and CCPA, you end up in this dilemma of, okay, is it ethical or legal to collect excessive data, massive amounts of data to optimize productivity? When you're balancing that against what is the specific purpose for which I'm allowed to use this data?
It's not about bad intentions. In our ER example, you're trying to prioritize care for those who need it most. But if the data you use isn't fully consented or goes beyond the original scope, you could be undermining the very trust you're trying to build.
From a legal perspective, if you overcollect data, you can end up being out of compliance with privacy laws, right? Where there's data minimization principles. So it's kind of this data minimization versus operational efficiency, I guess I would call it. And it's a challenge that I think about every day.
And she's not alone. Every business using PI or AI is dealing with this tension. The more data you feed to the system, the more powerful your insight. But also, the higher your data privacy risk. And that's why confidentiality isn't just a legal checkbox. It's a trust issue.
Explain the decisions that are made by automated processes and allow stakeholders to review and challenge those decisions. Obviously, always top of mind, protecting privacy and security of the data. So you need secure systems, you need to minimize data collection, comply, of course, with data privacy laws.
Last but not least is transparency. In the emergency room, a system suggests that one patient waits longer than another. Transparency means doctors don't just get a recommendation, but they get the reasoning behind it. So it's not just about what to do, it's about why. And that makes all the difference.
We talk about transparency and accountability, providing clear explanations for how decisions are made by intelligent systems, right? And offering visibility into those automated processes so that people understand and can trust the systems that they're relying on.
Transparency isn't just about code or documentation. It's about making the system understandable for the people who depend on it.
Transparency is referring to the fact that people should be able to understand process intelligence diagnostics. So if a tool gives certain conclusions, they should understand what it actually means. And one should also understand the pipeline that has been used to come to these results. Because it could have been that in the pipeline, let's say certain information was left out or there were certain data transformations that are leading to a particular result. And if you do not know that, you may completely misinterpret what comes out of it.
Say a system flags discharge delay. A clinician looks at the recommendation, but unless they can see why it flagged it, they're flying blind. And when things go wrong, nobody knows where to look or who to ask.
Another process mining example, I think, would be, explaining to a customer why a process mining algorithm flagged a particular bottleneck in an organization's operations, right? You might see a flag, you don't know what's behind it. So ensuring transparency there will help the customer understand what's behind the flag and help them make better decisions going forward.
That's the point. Transparency means understanding the decision-making and knowing why a patient gets flagged or not. It lets the people on the ground question the system or back it up with confidence. So the people on the ground, whether they're doctors, nurses, or the surgery team, aren't just following the system. They trust the process. AI can be brilliant, but it can also be wildly wrong. And that's why the final safeguard in any responsible system isn't code, it's people. Imagine an ER where a process intelligence tool recommends early discharge for a patient. The system flags them as low risk. But a nurse notices something the data didn't catch. A weak pulse, subtle confusion, and in that moment, it's not the system making the call. It's the human.
People talk about hallucinations with Gen AI. They're real. I've seen them. And so I think that's just one example of where you need somebody in the loop. I think it still has the incredible capability to increase productivity dramatically, right? Increase accuracy in many cases. But I don't think we're ever going to see a time when you don't have a human in the loop. So I think it's really important to remember that. And I think it also helps build trust as well.
That trust between clinicians and the system is what makes process intelligence work in practice. It's not just about catching mistakes. It's about adding context.
If you think about just basic uses, of Gen AI today, you have the ability to do massive amounts of research within seconds. It can give broader context in many ways to have people think differently about the question that they're asking. But at least today, I think there has to be a human in the loop to actually digest that and then apply it to whatever the problem is they're trying to solve.
And Will agrees. He sees human oversight as part of the design.
So if a tool gives certain conclusions, they should understand what it actually means. And one should also understand the pipeline that has been used to come to these results. Because it could have been that in the pipeline, let's say certain information was left out, or there were certain data transformations that are leading to a particular result. And if you do not know that, you may completely misinterpret what comes out of it.
Back to the emergency room. The system flags the patient for discharge. But the doctor sees something subtle. They pause, reassess, and then decide to keep them overnight. And that's the loop we need. It's not human versus machine. It's human with machine.
Humans should be overseeing really critical decisions, and the system should be designed to kind of complement humans as opposed to replacing them or overriding them.
And that's what responsible process intelligence is really about. It's not just about speed, not just about scale, but about fairness, accuracy, confidentiality, and transparency.
If you have process intelligence, the people that are leveraging the outcomes from that need to be able to trust that process. And so if you don't show that you are being responsible in how you're leveraging that process intelligence or how you're designing the PI tools, then you won't gain the trust of the users and the stakeholders.
And that's the irony, right? Because to make the most of process intelligence, we don't just need better algorithms. We need to design systems that earn our trust. That's how we protect privacy, improve decisions, and yes, save lives. Because when it comes to high-stake decisions, like in our ER, what you really want is simple. You want to trust the process. Join us next time, as we'll show you what happens when that trust fuels transformation. We're heading to BMW, where thousands of employees are already using PI. We're taking things from ethics to execution. Because when processes work, everything works.
AI's got a trash problem. It's getting garbage in, so it's putting a lot of garbage out. AI is powerful, but it's only as good as the processes and data it's working with. That's why at Celonis, we make processes work and give AI the data and context it needs, like rules, benchmarks, and KPIs, so it knows what makes something good or bad for business, and AI can go from letdown to breakthrough. Search Celonis, Celonis, to make AI work.